Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Nature of the Business, episode 7. I'm David.
And I'm Monique.
And this week we're talking about building an amazing brand. The more that we build YGN and we're on this journey building the brand, the more you realize all the different facets to building a lasting brand. And so, Monique, you're definitely a student of brand, as am I. And you've watched a lot of brands, you've worked for brands, and you're building a brand. Lots of people have different ideas of what a brand is and branding is. And there's just so much to the concept of a brand. So to you, what is a brand? How would you define what a brand is?
I'd say a brand is all the things that make up the way your customers perceive you. A lot of times when you go to these branding people, they'll give you a logo, give you some colors, and they'll send you along your way. And there's so much more behind what a brand is, and it includes the relationship that you build with your customers.
Yeah, I like that definition. I think about a brand as a way by which a consumer moves from their current state to their future state through your product. And sometimes it can be a promise, right? Everyone says, oh, what's your brand promise? Your brand is a promise. But everyone has their current version of themselves and they have their future version of themselves. And your brand it just shows up as, hey, you want to go in the water? You're not in the water right now. You want to go in the water? YGN is showing up and saying, hey, as a brand, we're going to take you from point A to point B. So it's almost like a vehicle to help the consumer get from their present state to their desired future state. And the brand articulates how the customer gets from that point A to point B. And it can be hyper-functional. It can tie into identity. So it's kind of how I think about it. I like the way that you describe the consumer perceiving your brand as the brand. So it's the observer. That's what the brand is. I like that as a counterpoint to what a brand is. And I actually don't think I've ever heard of brand described as that. So I think it's really unique to think about it that way. So with that, what is the YGN brand?
So YGN is known for our head wraps and now our swim turban, most notably. But we're also known for game-changing products for the textured hair space. So one thing that I consistently hear my customers say is, y'all never miss, which is like slang for you're always thinking of the next big thing, the next best thing. And so that is what we are. That's who we are. That's what we innovate for the textured hair space, whether it's head wraps or swim turbans or our puff pull. It really is what we are known for.
Yeah, that's a really powerful idea because for customers who have a pain, and there are lots of products that we could come out with, and we've had lots of conversations internally. And I know your refrain is, what's different about this, or how can we do it in a way that isn't meeting the market? So I think that's a really powerful idea of you're building the trust that when we're coming to market with it, it's going to be good.
We are not coming with the same thing on the shelves. We're not going to sell the same scrunchie or piece of fabric that you can find anywhere else. We're always looking to make things better and really think of the needs that are not being met of our customer.
And as a product-driven CEO, we talked about the swim turban and the initial story behind the swim turban. And how do you think about the story of the product and the product itself and the interplay between those two ideas? You have the product, and then if you're innovating, especially in a space either where the product didn't exist before or a space where the product has already existed and there's nuance about why this exists now. So take the sleep turban, for example. The sleep turban, most people wear bonnets when they sleep. And so YGN could have just made a bonnet, although we do sell bonnets, but you also came up with the sleep turban. How did you first envision the sleep turban? And then what was the conversation when you first launched the sleep turban, and maybe still happens around the sleep turban?
Whenever we launch a product, we tend to start in spaces where there's discomfort around textured hair, and going to sleep with a bonnet on, or even walking around with a bonnet on, it's a place that has tense conversation around it. So that most people would not think of a bonnet as something that's attractive or elevated. And women who go to bed with a bonnet, traditionally it was Black women who had to go to bed with bonnet. And there's this thing like around like intimacy and having a bonnet on. And there's this moment where it's maybe our white counterparts or our Asian counterparts don't have to deal with this at night. And so these are moments that we were trying to speak to in a way that says, it doesn't have to be that. Like, it can be elevated. Or even people who wear their bonnet out. It's a big conversation of whether you should wear your bonnet outside the house. My personal opinion is, I don't care. Do what you do with your hair. But like, you can go out the house and feel more elevated and still protect your hair. There are reasons why people wear their bonnets outside. Most of the time it's because if you're wearing a protective style or you're doing a twist out or something that is usually pretty unique to textured hair, you don't want to, sometimes you're not ready to take it out of whatever molding form it's in. There are reasons for those things, and it doesn't have to be, or it doesn't have to feel, what's the word for it? It doesn't have to feel homely. It doesn't have to feel like you're not put together. It can feel good. And
it's funny because, and we have this conversation often in our marketing meetings, especially when we have a new product or we're going into new spaces. And it does take a little bit to anchor what we're going to say when we launch our men's V2. Why is V2 better than V1? When we launch Swim Turban, what's the story behind the Swim Turban? And if you remember when we launched the Sleep Turban, that we launched with, oh, this is not your mama's bonnet. And people weren't happy about that. And it also had features to explain why you would want to get the sleep turban versus wearing a bonnet. And we had to capture that both visually and in a description. There's the adjustable loop and the affinity loop. And so I think great brands, and we aspire to do this, is, all right, we are making something that we think is going to be good for you as a consumer. And there's been a lot of thought about what's already out there and how can we make it better? What materials? How can you feel better about it? And I think almost inevitably, big picture is how can we change the behavior of what has been done around your hair and how you care for it for decades, for hundreds of years. And so that does require, I think from the marketing perspective or the storytelling perspective, there is an aspect of, okay, what's the story? What are we sharing? I always think about it as when somebody has a product, what are we telling them and sharing with them so that they then share with their friend about the product, right? And so it could be features, it could be the why of why you need a new type of bonnet. And so I think that the interplay of product and story, to me, they're almost, especially when you're innovating, you have to create that story around it and articulate what the story is, because our products are priced at a higher price point than most of what people are already buying in the market. And so we, in some ways, we have to provide the new product and the rationale for why you want to aspire to that product.
And especially for our products, we always try to elevate the experience of our customer, because historically, taking care of textured hair, because people just had to make do with what they had, it wasn't an elevated experience. And because of that, we do end up in a higher, more premium price point, but it's because of the very intentional decision to elevate that experience.
Yeah. So talking about elevation of the experience, what are the touch points that you think about most for the brand and elevating the experience?
First, it's materials. So a lot of times we do mostly for our non-swim products, everything is satin lined, except for sleep, which is silk lined. And a lot of times when you'll see mass produced products that say they're satin lined, it's not actually satin. It might be a softer material, it might be more pliable material, but it's actually not satin. And that kind of defeats the point, because satin is a very specific weave that maintains the hair. And so materials are important. I really do think about the details of material. I do play with the texture of material a lot, and I play with the details of the materials that we use in our products so that they feel luxe, so that they feel quality and they feel elevated.
And then from the visual side, we have a partner that we've worked with who's done creative direction. And I know you've always thought about how does the look of the website and imagery of the product, how does that support the product itself?
Because their products are fashion and function products, it's important that we present the way that we want our customers to feel. We try to always have beautiful imagery that really highlights ethnic beauty because we want our customer to feel beautiful. We want our customer to feel pampered and luxurious. And so that's why we go in the direction we do around the imagery for our products.
I know we've had this conversation of aspiration versus being relatable, and we've vacillated between these two, and they don't always have to be one or the other. But as a brand, our products, we do want them to be relatable, and we want to have people feel like they're also elevated. What's been the tension between those two ideas, and how in your mind do you square those two ideas of aspiration and also have it be relatable?
I think there's a line where the two meet. I think that there is a space where you can be relatable and still value quality, value a certain look. I think that it's easy to stray in either direction. You're like, oh, it's like a pendulum. You're trying to make it look really nicely presented, and you might go too far in one direction as far as styling, as far as how you present on social media, how you present on the website. You can go too far in one direction, and then you say, oh, this is too much. We got to be relatable now. And then you strip too much of it away. So it's like about finding the balance and finding that equilibrium of the right styling mixed with the right messaging and the right amount of relatability.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, it can be fluid, especially if you think about it from the perspective of the consumer. Sometimes you want to push the envelope and the consumer isn't necessarily there, and you do have to meet the consumer where they are. Otherwise, you fray that relationship, or the way that you've been in the past you show up in a way that's different. And with any relationship, if things change, people are like, what? I want the old Kanye. Like, you want the old thing versus the new thing. And so you are in this dance with your customer, and you always have to be feeling, that's almost like a gut feel. There's no playbook for that. Bud Light, Dylan Mulvaney, I don't know if you've kept track of that. But the recent issues with Bud Light, and Bud Light had a trans influencer in one of their commercials. And as a result, the sales for Bud Light have been tanking since they featured that influencer. And in a lot of ways, as a brand, you do have to consider, okay, who are we presenting to? And can they go there with us? And do they want to go there with us? And at the same time, we have an obligation. They are the people who we've been serving. And so we have an obligation to still continue to serve those people. There's no right or wrong around that idea.
That's a tough moment to be in, because as a brand, that culture evolves, that you serve all types of people, and to allow for certain people to hold you back from moving forward. It's a difficult moment because you have to decide, okay, are we going to suffer this hit to sales, or are we going to just continue to move forward and stand in what we believe?
Yeah. What brands do you admire? What are some of the brands that you think about, what would this brand do if they were in my situation, or 10 years from now, I would love to be like this brand?
A good question. It's Beyonce. I think that I admire Beyonce as a brand because I think that she has been firm in who she is, what she stands for. And I think that despite a whole lot of kind of hate that she gets around who she is, she has always been firm in who she is.
Mm-hmm.
Always strives for excellence. So I think as a person, I think I like a personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
I do look to people like her to how might she handle this?
Yeah, no, I think that's great in that brands don't always have to be products. They can be people. And increasingly, brands and people they're tied together. The outward-looking CEO, that type of thing. I think that's something that is starting to take the influencer CEO. I think that's starting to take a front seat. We care more about people than we do about products. So if you can have someone who represents something or stands for something that you really appreciate, then in a lot of ways, you're going to buy the products that they offer or listen to the music, right? I think it's a great moment right now to be talking about Beyonce because I think there are a whole lot of people who never listened to a country album before until this album, right? And so a great brand can, like you say, you take your customer, you take your audience along with you on your journey as a brand. And if that's authentic, then and they trust you, then they're willing to go with you where that goes.
And to be able to break barriers in that way is part of her brand. She's been doing it for as long as I've been watching her. And so people will embrace that change with her. Even if there are people on the fringes who are criticizing her for it, she's maintained her brand, her core brand so well that the people who are with her for the journey.
I think it's a really good point of growth and brand growth, and at the same time, trust. And so at times, as brands grow, they offer more products. And if they're doing new and different things, or especially with artists, and we've experienced this with YGN, there might be a moment where you loved an artist. You loved Beyonce when she first came on the scene, and now lots of people love Beyonce, and the music that she makes isn't the same that she did when she first got started. And with every new album, it potentially expands out, and some would argue that waters down the brand, but some would argue that it expands the brand. And so how do you think about the growth of a brand and authenticity around the brand and those two things and how people perceive that?
As long as the values remain somewhat the same or remain the same, I think it whatever changes around those values, it doesn't mean it's been watered down. So for instance, like we try to do things to the highest quality that we possibly can at YGN. Start to switch things and people perceive that as not as good quality, they call us out for it. They don't say, for instance, if when we release new products, they don't say, oh, you're just a head wrap brand. Why are you doing all this? That waters it down. But they know us for making quality products, making innovative products. When we start straying away from that is when we see our customers start to kick back.
I think it's a really great conversation, especially because of who YGN is and the types of products that we make. I think our community feel ownership and pride in the fact that you're showing up and making these products for them. And then sometimes you see people who, like you said, you always say we make products for the ethnic audience first, or ethnic community first. But if you have white Caucasian people who are wearing, people will ask, can I wear a do-rag? Can I wear the halo turban? Or can I wear the bun turban? Or can I wear the swim turban? Or can I wear the sleep turban? As a brand, if you have people who are interested, do you say, hey, come on in and show those people in ads or in creative? Or do you keep it core? How do you think about that?
I think it's important to be true to the foundation of who you are, right? So I would never police what someone else is going to wear. We make products. We don't dictate who wears them. It's a personal decision whether you feel that things are appropriation or appreciation, or you really feel like there's a need for you to wear the product. There are certain parts of our products that don't necessarily work well with non-ethnic hair. Reasoning for wearing is the question. So I don't police that. Anyone who is interested in and wants to wear the product, I'm not here to stop them from doing that. I would say as far as marketing goes, we come from a space of ethnic beauty and underserved people. And so that's just the foundation of who we are. Any brand has its visuals that are the foundation of who they are. And they try to stay true to that. Gaps makes the same ads year after year that look exactly the same way for a reason, because they're appealing to that core base of who they are. And I'm probably not the typical person that would be in a Gap ad, but I go to Gap and buy t-shirts because they make great t-shirts. They make clothes. So as far as like the visuals, I don't think you need to chase the people who are wearing the product. I think that you should know from your foundation who you were and who you were appealing to.
Yeah, that's great. And I think this kind of folds in. You start serving a community, and what role does the community play in a brand? You always have your early fans, and you have people who buy whatever you drop. How do you think about those people, either in the messaging and or the product development? Now we have lots of different products, right? So we have a men's turban, and we have the swim turban and sleep turban. So how do you think about our community as we think about the messaging and or the actual, literally the product itself?
As far as products goes, we follow the lead of our customers. They are very vocal about what they want to see next. And if I hear enough of like men's turbans were born because we had men with locks wearing our women's turbans. And it was really this moment of, okay, there's a need out there for our turbans for men with locks. And so we began to design. And also our people were like, can I work out in this product? So it's really just about listening to your customers and then knowing what that need is that they're trying to fill.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story, and we'll talk more about it someday. But we thought that the closed turban, which was the women's style, was going to be the most popular one. And we added the halo turban, which was not designed specifically for the locks, but that is the most popular turban. And so if you're listening to your community, you may not get it 100% right, but you'll know that you're on the right track. Mm-hmm. And then they'll vote with their dollars, they'll vote with their time, and they'll tell you what you got right and what you didn't necessarily get right or what you could be doing better.
So true.
Today, YGN's 7 years old, and we all know brands take a long time to build. What phase of growth is the YGN brand in today?
I would say we're transitional right now. I think that we spent a couple years scaling, and whenever you grow quickly, you pick up things that you didn't necessarily need. And I think that we've spent a couple of months just shedding some of those things and getting back to what really matters. And I think that right now we're transitioning into knowing how to run a brand of this scale and at the same time be true to the foundation of who we are.
So you mentioned shedding and getting back to what really matters. What really matters?
I think the needs of the customer definitely matter. And I think that the core and the quality of our products matters. And so if those of you who are listening out there, you notice that we haven't really launched anything new in about 3 months. And that's because we really are working on the core of brands, making sure that we're strong before we move forward again.
So if you had to fast forward 5 years, what is that? What does YGN look like in 5 years? What do you hope the brand becomes and grows into, out of this transition and future product lines? And what's your vision for where YGN is going?
YGN, we are just an inclusive hair accessory brand. And if you think about what on the shelves today, it's not always super inclusive. There are some products that think about curly hair, but it's not the majority. And there are some that just flat out damage your hair. And so I think that there's so much space on the shelf for more inclusive products. And there are so many entrepreneurs out there that are thinking of these needs for our customers or for the market. And I think that we have the ability to create a wider space outside of consumables in hair accessories for the textured hair type.
Love that. And so we just went into Bloomingdale's and we're going into CVS. And as a brand, the experience in a Bloomingdale's is very different than a CVS experience. Do you think about YGN stretching, being in those different places? And how does YGN show up in different places where the consumer needs them, but still maintain that kind of sense of brand and elevation and quality?
We sell such a broad range of products that it's honestly not difficult to show up in a lot of different places. For instance, in Target, we show up as premium. We show up at the top of their price range for a similar product. In Bloomingdale's, we show up at the bottom range. So sometimes we walk the line of where each product belongs, and we think of each product as their own individual brand almost. So YGN Swim might appeal to a different audience than our puff pull does. And so they do have to show up in different places to be available for different customers. But I think as a brand, we're cohesive as far as the quality, the premium nature of our products, and the audience that we serve.
If someone's just getting started building their brand out there, most of us, and I think it's justifiable, where our first inclination is to think about the name and to think about the logo and to think about the color scheme. Is that the way to look at it? Or how would you modify that when you're launching a brand?
I think it's actually important to think of what's important to you as the founder as before you even move forward. So that's because it's going to dictate a lot of the decisions you make as a brand. So for me personally, because we had such a unique product, it was important for me to try and keep everything as far as production in-house. And that dictated the pricing that we had to apply to our product. It dictated the quality of things that we did in-house. If I were to just say, okay, it's most important for me to sell as many of these as possible, let me send it to China and make it, then maybe quality wouldn't be a part of our brand. And so it's important to know for yourself what's important to you around your products, how you think it would be best to move forward. And then that's going to dictate a lot of the components of what your brand actually is.
Yeah, you may be a more rare founder than most in that you're actually making the product and you're thinking about what's new. And I would guess that most brands aren't that way. If you're making dresses, there were probably already dresses that existed out there. Right. In that world, let's not say t-shirts because it's really hard to create a t-shirt brand, but some of the cooler brands today, how are they doing what they do? What do you think that the brands that stand out and the brands that grow that aren't making things that are being made for the first time? How would you suggest that someone start a brand like that? Is the same advice? Start with your values?
Yeah, there are brands. I'm really a fan of the Brandon Blackwood brand. And I think that what he's done is he's created a conversation with customers where design is at the forefront. So he's not making anything. Some of his designs are pretty unique, but people have made handbags before, right? Puts design at the forefront and crowdsources that with his customers. He releases sneak peeks of them, and every drop, people are rushing back to get more. And he doesn't sell it at a super expensive price point either. Mm-hmm. So it is really more around like a relationship with this customer than is solely around, and it's for customers that are enthusiastic about design first. There are brands like Telfar. They all have a great brand, and maybe I just lean towards brands that are very community-based, but they have a brand that is very much a drop-focused culture, color drops. Sometimes they'll have large collaborations. They did one with UGG, but it's around drops and people just being excited about the next thing that's coming. And you have to get people engaging with you in order to get them that excited about the next thing you have going.
Yeah, I think Telfar just brings the energy there. It's just straight energy all the time, and you know it. It sounds like it all goes back to community, or maybe it's some combination of both. It's who are you as a founder, as someone who's starting? What's unique about your perspective on the world that you want to see created? And for YGN, it's that you go down that aisle and there aren't many options, and the options aren't great. Right. And the world that you see is that aisle has, whether it's YGN creating those products or whether there are other brands, but that shelf should have other products on the shelf, and that should change. And then on the other side, it's as a founder, what world are you creating? And then from a community perspective, what gets you guys excited? Where's the overlap, the Venn diagram of those two places of me showing up who's unique and what you guys like? And how do we come together and forge this new world that we want to see?
Yeah, it really just is a journey of the founder going out and finding their people. And that shows up through imagery, it shows up through customer service, it shows up through promises and keeping that covenant with your customer.
And then where does imagery and visuals and logos, at what point do you start thinking about that? How do you approach that?
Oh, I think that varies from brand to brand. I did it the DIY way, which is probably not the best way, but I went through 3 different logos before we landed on the one that we have. Actually hired a branding firm to give us colors and give us a logo. Incorporated all the products that we had built up to that time. Honestly, I would say that it matters, but it's not the most important thing, the colors and the logo that you have, because whatever it is, people are going to begin to associate who you are with whatever those things are. And so it's important, but it's not the most important thing.
Yeah, even down to the company name. Initially it was You Go Natural, and now it's YGN Inc., and the logo is YGN. Obviously, You Go Natural is the roots, no pun intended, of the business, my natural hair care. but YGN stands for something bigger than just going natural.
Exactly. Yeah, it was made at the core for people who had textured hair, but now we serve so many customers that I would say we've become bigger than that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Brand evolves, and if you're listening out there and if you haven't read the story of Shoe Dogs, it's an excellent book about the story of Nike. And if you can imagine, there was a time where it was weird to see someone running down the street. People didn't run. That wasn't a behavior that people did. And the way that Nike started was that they made shoes specifically for runners, which was a very niche audience at that time. And the way that they really started to get their foothold was that they found the little small running clubs around the country of people who were the weirdos who liked running. And they hired the people who were in those running clubs to say, hey, these are the sneakers that you should run in. They sponsored a runner in the Olympics, Prefontaine. Nike isn't necessarily even thought of as a runner's sneaker anymore. It's culture. It's bigger than running, but that's where they started. And so brands can grow and evolve.
I was just listening to Shoe Dog this morning, re-listening to it. The last time I listened to it was years ago. Like even opened the factory, and even after having had so many experiences in the past few years, it's like you hear it a different way. It's really a great book to read.
Yeah, if you're a founder or you're starting a brand, the Nike story Shoe Dogs is definitely one that you want to give a listen to. Is there anything else that you want to talk about brand-wise?
No, I thought that was pretty good. It was pretty comprehensive.
This has been a journey from building the company to the brand and our audience and our community. You guys are along for the ride. So if you have any feedback on the YGN brand or you have anything that you'd love to see us become, obviously always drop us a note on social, email info@yougonatural.com or natureofthebusiness@yougonatural.com. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thanks, guys.
All right, take care.